It was the age of tuxedos and typewriters, of cigarette smoke curling in studio offices while publicists rehearsed lies. Stars were property, love was marketing. The perfect couple was a contract, not a heartbeat. And yet, there were rebels. People who loved the wrong faces, the wrong stories, the wrong souls. And by doing so, they changed the way the world saw glamour itself. Humphrey Bogart had the kind of face the studio didn't know how to polish. Too lined, too tired, too honest. When 19-year-old Lauren Bacall walked into his life, it was like a match striking celluloid. The public said she was too young. The studio begged them to keep it quiet. They didn't. On the set of To Have and Have Not, Bogart's gruff humor met Bacall's calm defiance. Off camera, he left his wife. On camera, he left an era of pretense behind. When he died, Bacall kept his whistle, the one he used to call her on set. She never stopped hearing it. Clark Gable's grin could melt an audience, but Carole Lombard's laughter melted him. Hollywood thought they were opposites, the rough king and the comedic queen. They married quietly, without a script, and the world fell in love with their messiness. Then tragedy came fast. Lombard's plane went down in 1942, and Gable followed the wreckage into silence. He enlisted in the Air Force, not for patriotism, but because the ground hurt too much. Years later, he was buried beside her, his last wish fulfilled. Charlie Chaplin was already legend when he met Una O'Neill, the teenage daughter of a playwright. The newspapers called him scandalous, desperate, obscene. He called her salvation. Their marriage lasted 34 years, longer than most careers. They lived in exile in Switzerland, building a quiet life of children, gardens, and letters. When Chaplin died, Una withdrew from the world, still wearing the ring he'd given her before their first night in New York. Errol Flynn had once been Hollywood's golden pirate, but by the 1950s his legend had rusted. Trials, rumors, whiskey. It all drowned the smile that once sold adventure. Then Patrice Wymore appeared, young, clear-eyed, and willing to stand in the storm. They married on a whim, and everyone predicted failure. Yet she stayed through every scandal. He was kind in ways people never saw, she said later. When he died in her arms, she simply whispered, "Flynn was a man." That was her epitaph for him. Spencer Tracy hid his heart behind control. He drank to keep steady. He prayed to stay silent. Then came Katharine Hepburn, sharp as broken glass, proud as sunrise. Their affair became legend, but to them it was simply life. For 25 years they shared rented houses and whispered phone calls. He never divorced. She never demanded it. When he died, she packed up their photographs and disappeared for months. "Love has nothing to do with show business," she said when she returned. Frank Sinatra had already lived 1,000 tabloid stories before he met Mia Farrow. He was 51. She was 21, drifting through a world that didn't know what to make of her. To reporters, they were absurd. To each other, essential. Their marriage burned fast, beautiful, and doomed. He taught her jazz. She taught him patience. They divorced, but the connection never died. Decades later, she still kept his number under Francis. He still called her kid. Gary Cooper was a walking contradiction, shy and magnetic, faithful and restless. His wife, Veronica Balfe, knew all of it. The gossip columns called her saintly. Friends called her steel. Through his affairs and breakdowns, she never left. When cancer took him in 1961, she stood at his bedside and whispered, "You're safe now." For her, that was enough. Their story wasn't glossy, it was grace under pressure. James Stewart wasn't supposed to find peace in Hollywood, but he did. With Gloria Hattrick McLean, a widow and mother of 2. They married without fanfare, built a home, raised children, and refused to perform for cameras. When Gloria died, Stewart sat alone on the porch, looking at the hills above Beverly. "It's just me now," he told a friend. 6 months later, he followed her. In the end, decency was the only drama he ever needed. Marlon Brando's heart was as volatile as his genius. During the filming of Mutiny on the Bounty, he met Tarita Teripaya, a Tahitian actress untouched by fame's machinery. She laughed when he forgot his lines, called him "fat boy" when he brooded, and he fell completely. He bought land on her island, built a house with no phones, and stayed until Hollywood became a memory. Their marriage fractured, but his ashes returned to Tahiti. He said it was the only place he'd ever been real. Then there was Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, the couple that destroyed cynicism. He was already a star. She was rising fast. Their marriage was supposed to last a few years, at best. Instead, it became Hollywood's one true love story. They laughed through decades of scripts, children, and aging. When asked how they stayed faithful, Newman answered, "Why go out for hamburger when you've got steak at home?" It sounded like a joke, but it was poetry. The narrator's voice softens. 10 couples, he says. 10 acts of rebellion in a world built on illusion. The studio heads measured worth by symmetry. These people measured it by truth. Their partners weren't publicity ornaments. They were anchors in a sea of flashbulbs. Bogart found calm in Bacall's fire. Gable found eternity in Lombard's laughter. Chaplin found forgiveness in Una's youth. Flynn found dignity in Wymore's loyalty. Tracy found quiet in Hepburn's chaos. Sinatra found reflection in Pharaoh's fragility. Cooper found faith in Veronica's endurance. Stewart found home in Gloria's steadiness. Brando found freedom in Tarita's island. Newman found forever in Woodward's light. Each love story rewrote Hollywood's script. They reminded the world that beauty fades, fame lies, and affection, when it's real, outlives everything. The film slows, and the narrator continues, almost whispering now. They shocked Hollywood because they refused to treat love as performance. In the dark theater, their faces flicker. Laughter at rap parties, stolen glances on set, the quiet terror of being seen without makeup or mask. They were flawed, frightened, alive. Some stayed together until death, others burned out fast. But each one carved a scar on the industry's surface, a reminder that humanity had slipped past the censors. Outside, the Hollywood sign glows pale against the hills. Time has taken the lights, the contracts, the gossip columns. What's left are ghosts and the stories that refuse to die. A reel spins out its last few feet. The narrator's tone turns elegiac. They shocked Hollywood not by who they were, but by who they loved. In a world that measured everything by looks, these stars chose something impossible to photograph: tenderness. The screen fades to black. The sound of a film strip whipping free echoes through the room like wind through palm trees. The narrator exhales one final line. The Golden Age promised perfection. What it delivered was proof that even under the brightest lights, love can't be staged. Silence follows, heavy and holy. The credits are invisible. The story remains. Somewhere beyond the beam of the projector, the ghosts of those 10 couples linger, still whispering, still laughing, still reminding the world that beauty was never the point at all. The camera fades in again. Dust motes drift through a shaft of light, suspended like ghosts that refuse to leave the frame. A reel clacks softly somewhere behind the curtain, the heartbeat of old Hollywood still pulsing in the dark. The narrator's voice returns, low and reverent. But the story didn't end with them, he says. Their choices rippled outward, shaping the generations that followed. Actors, dreamers, rebels who mistook the spotlight for warmth. Photographs flash, sepia tones, champagne smiles, pressed tuxedos. Behind every smile, a compromise. Behind every kiss, a negotiation between image and truth. Bogart and Bacall became the template for impossible devotion, the myth of the unbreakable pair. But even myths cast shadows. After his death, Bacall tried to find her footing again. Short engagements, quiet heartbreaks. Each time she stepped into a new room, people still saw him beside her. She never escaped his ghost, and she never wanted to. Clark Gable's legacy was different. After Lombard, he never truly returned to Hollywood's rhythm. He made films, yes, but his eyes had already checked out. You can see it in his last picture, The Misfits, where every line feels like a goodbye whispered to the world that once worshipped him. Charlie Chaplin's laughter never lost its magic, but it carried an echo. In Switzerland, his children recalled evenings when he'd sit by the window and play violin until the garden went dark. Una would sit nearby, saying nothing, her hand resting over his bowing wrist. That silence was their love letter. Errol Flynn's legend aged like smoke, fading, fragrant, impossible to capture. Patrice kept his memory alive quietly, restoring his old yacht and leaving it moored in Jamaica Bay. Locals say she'd visit sometimes at sunset, sitting on the deck alone, humming songs he once sang off-key. Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn's story became Hollywood scripture. Biographers picked it apart for decades, trying to find scandal where there was only survival. When she was asked once if she regretted loving a married man, Hepburn said, "I regret not having more time." Sinatra's voice, meanwhile, became a monument to longing. After Mia Farrow, he drifted through marriages, friendships, and feuds. But even in his last concerts, when he forgot lyrics and needed help from teleprompters, he always paused on one line, "I did it my way," and smiled as if remembering her. Gary Cooper's daughter once said that her mother, Veronica, never spoke of him in the past tense. She'd talk about Coop as though he had just stepped out for a walk, as though any minute he'd return, hat tilted, grin soft. Some people grieve by letting go. She grieved by pretending the story wasn't over. James Stewart's legacy rests not in his films, but in his letters. When Gloria died, he wrote her every morning for months, pages never mailed, full of small talk about the garden, the weather, the neighbors. When he died, those letters were found in his desk, stacked neatly, addressed simply, "To my girl." Marlon Brando's ashes scattered over Tahiti seemed like an ending, but his love for Tarita never really faded. She kept a framed photo of him by her window until her own death, and locals said that every night she whispered his name in Tahitian before sleep, a habit she never broke. Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward's story lasted the longest, and perhaps that's why it feels eternal. Even in old age, they held hands on red carpets as though the cameras didn't exist. When he died, she wore his wedding ring around her neck. Years later, when she began to lose her memory, she would still reach for that chain, smile and say, "Paul's here." The narrator continues softly. "These weren't fairy tales," he says. "They were battlefields, between image and intimacy, between what the world demanded and what the heart dared." The film cuts to black and white footage of post-war Los Angeles. Neon lights buzz, cars crawl down Sunset Boulevard, and the faces that once filled theaters now stare back from posters curling on brick walls. The next generation learned from them, but not always the right lessons. Studio bosses sold love as product, packaging passion into publicity shots. But somewhere in the fine print, the truth remained. The real love stories couldn't be choreographed. The real cuts to the 1960s, the age of scandal, freedom, and loss. Reporters with cameras replaced typewriters. Privacy became a myth. Yet the echoes of those old couples lingered in the way stars held hands at premieres, in how they flinched under flashbulbs, in how they sought something real in a town built on fiction. Lauren Bacall became a mentor to younger actresses. She told them, "Don't marry the idea of a man. Marry the man." It sounded simple, but in Hollywood, it was rebellion. Una O'Neill's children carried Chaplin's name into new eras of cinema, but she never returned to the stage. When asked why, she smiled faintly and said, "Because I already lived my best story." Patrice Wymore spent her later years farming in Jamaica, raising cattle and selling produce to tourists who never recognized her. When they asked if she missed Hollywood, she'd laugh. "I married it," she'd say. Katharine Hepburn, in her final interview, was asked if she believed in soulmates. She frowned. "I don't know about souls," she said, "but I know I found my match." Mia Farrow turned her heartbreak into art, her performances dripping with sincerity the industry hadn't seen before. When she spoke of Sinatra, she didn't use nostalgia. She said, "He was impossible. That's why he mattered." Veronica Cooper spent her twilight years walking through the old sets of Paramount Studios when they were open for tours. Few recognized her, but when they did, she'd smile and say, "Oh, you remember Coop, don't you?" As though she was still his co-star. Gloria Stewart's children often said their parents' home never lost its warmth. The furniture remained untouched, the smell of his pipe tobacco faint but eternal. Love, they said, still lived there like a polite ghost. Tarita's Island became a sanctuary for fans who wanted to see where Brando had vanished from the world. Locals tell stories of a man who would walk the beaches at night, muttering lines from old films, only to laugh halfway through, realizing no one was filming. Joanne Woodward, long after Newman's death, would still sign autographs for fans who whispered, "You gave us hope." She'd reply softly, "He gave it to me first." The narrator pauses. "They were ordinary people in extraordinary light," he says. "Their love didn't need to be perfect, it only needed to be real." As the reel clicks forward, new images appear. Film stills, love letters, headlines, some yellowed, some torn, all telling the same story. that beauty was never the secret ingredient. It was honesty. Hollywood's golden couples reminded the world that elegance wasn't airbrushed. It was earned through patience, forgiveness, and laughter after heartbreak. A montage follows. Bacall at a typewriter, Gable on an airfield, Chaplin kissing his children goodnight, Flynn sailing at dusk, Hepburn reading alone, Sinatra raising a glass, Cooper smiling shyly at the camera, Stewart feeding birds, Brando in a hammock, Newman cooking dinner. The music swells, strings and static, the sound of time itself. The narrator's voice grows softer. In the end, the golden age wasn't about stars, he says. It was about constellations, each one burning bright, alone, yet connected. Outside the theater, dawn begins to creep across the Hollywood hills. The letters of the old sign catch the light, faded, cracked, but still standing, like the stories themselves. And somewhere, if you listen closely, you can still hear it. Bacall's whistle, Lombard's laughter, Chaplin's violin, Flynn's toast, Hepburn's sharp retort, Sinatra's croon, Cooper's shy chuckle, Stewart's slow drawl, Brando's deep sigh, Newman's low hum. 10 echoes, 1 legacy. The reel runs out again, flapping wildly in the projector, light spilling into the empty seats. The narrator doesn't speak for a moment. Then quietly, they shocked Hollywood not with scandal, but with sincerity. Silence settles again. Dust falls like confetti through the beam. He exhales, one last time. The golden age has ended, he says, but its love stories still breathe. Because the heart, unlike film, never fades. The lights rise slowly, washing the theater in pale gold. The audience is gone, but their ghosts remain, seated in neat rows, applauding softly for a truth Hollywood never meant to reveal. And somewhere, beyond the curtains, a new reel waits to begin. Its title unwritten, its lovers unknown, its promise the same, that even in a world of illusions, love remains the one performance no one can fake. The lights dim. Film grain flickers across the screen. A narrator's voice cuts through the hum of an old projector. Hollywood once told the world what perfection looked like, he says. But behind the glow, real people broke its rules. It was the age of tuxedos and typewriters, of cigarette smoke curling through studio offices while publicists rehearsed lies. Love was marketing. Marriage was a contract. And yet some rebels dared to love the wrong faces. And in doing so, they changed everything. Humphrey Bogart was all edges and smoke until 19-year-old Lauren Bacall walked into his life. Their love defied the studios, outlived the gossip, and when he died, she kept his whistle, the sound that once called her home. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, found laughter in Carole Lombard. Their love burned bright, then ended in a plane crash that shattered him. He joined the Air Force not for country, but because the ground hurt too much. Charlie Chaplin found salvation in Una O'Neill. The world mocked them. He called her peace. Exiled in Switzerland, they built a quiet life. When he died, she vanished from the world, still wearing his ring. Errol Flynn's legend drowned in scandal, until Patrice Wymore saw the man, not the myth. She stayed through every storm, and when he died in her arms, whispered, "Flynn was a man." Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn lived in shadowed devotion, never married, always bound. Love, she said, has nothing to do with show business. For them, it was truth whispered between rehearsals. Frank Sinatra met Mia Farrow at 51 and 21. They burned fast, taught each other tenderness, and though the marriage ended, the number Francis stayed in her phone for life. Gary Cooper's wife, Veronica, never left his side through fame, betrayal, and illness. When he died, she said only, "You're safe now." James Stewart found ordinary grace with Gloria, raising children far from the cameras. When she passed, he wrote her letters until his own death, each one addressed to "My girl." Marlon Brando sought freedom with Tahitian actress Tarita. She laughed at his moods, called him fat boy, and he fell in love with her world. His ashes returned there, the only place he was ever real. And Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, Hollywood's one true love story. Decades together, unshaken by fame. When asked about fidelity, he said, "Why go out for hamburger when you've got steak at home?" It sounded like humor. It was poetry.